Your son, he's gone.
He was weak and foolish, like his father.
So I destroyed him.
God, seems like 1,000 years ago. I fought my way out of that cave. Became Iron Man. Realized I loved you. I know I said no more surprises, but I was really hoping to pull off one last one.
Hello and welcome to the latest Weak and Foolish podcast. My name is Job Ang, and with me, as always, is
Mike Tang,
and we are here to talk about Avengers Endgame. This is the movie that we've all been waiting for, and this could end up being a long episode, so we're going to just cut straight to the chase. Mike, what did you think?
Yeah, it's been a while since I saw it. We saw it on opening night together on the Thursday that it came out, and I haven't seen it since. So, but it definitely left a huge impression on me. I had so much fun in this film. I think it was the most suitable way to close off and pay tribute to the last 11 years and 21 movies that came before it, and it pretty much shaped Hollywood and the entire movie-going experience. I think a lot of other studios have tried to launch a similar cinematic universe and have just failed in so many ways. This movie definitely feels like the end of an era because it closes off a lot of major arcs. It finishes the main story that's been running through this whole, and now it's being dubbed the Infinity Saga for 22 movies now. I think the movie it most closely resembles, in my opinion, is The Force Awakens. I think both movies, they know what fans love and they know what fans want to see. We love nostalgia. We love a return to the past iconic moments. We love callbacks to previous movies. And the thing about this movie is it doesn't just call back to those moments, but it does something very unique with the major things that we've seen over the last 11 years. And, because this is non-spoilers, I won't say too much about that. But yeah, I thought this is the perfect way to close off the saga. It's not a perfect movie by any means. It has a lot of glaring flaws that I think people will pick apart and criticize in years to come. But this is just one of those movies that's so good and so much fun, and it's a joyous experience that I just kind of overlooked all those issues. And every time an issue came up, I'm like, I don't know, I don't really buy into this. Like, they give you something else that gives you reason to cheer and to yell out loud. And the opening night crowd that we saw it with was one of the best audiences I've ever been with, and it makes a huge case for going out to the movies and watching it with a bunch of strangers. Like, you all collectively go on this journey together in the theater, and the movie owns you for 3 hours, and takes you on this trip. And it's so much fun to react with everybody else. It's almost like watching a sports game. Yeah, so I loved it. I can't wait to dive into spoilers and talk more specifically on what I loved.
Yeah, so you loved it.
This is I'd say this is in my top 5 superhero movies of all time.
Okay.
Yeah, it was that satisfying, I think. It really pays off. It rewards you for following this franchise for so long and for going to every movie.
Yeah. Mike and I, we did see it on opening night with a group of friends, and the energy in the theater was just electric, I think. No pun intended to Thor or anything like that. But I have rewatched it since then, and the second time we watched it, it was so quiet. People were chuckling here and there in jokes, but nowhere near the energy. There were people yelling out loud in the theater, I think us included, writhing in our seats just with sheer joy. And
yeah, I don't think I screamed so much in a movie before.
Yeah. And my brother was there too. Shout out to Elijah. But, he was writhing in his seat as well. And Isaac he kept looking over and going like, dude, that's the part we talked about for so long and it actually happened. It was so much fun. It felt like it felt like college graduation almost, the celebration that we had, and just seeing, wow, we've seen these characters through since 2008, and it really paid off. So that was a lot of fun. So I guess I could go into my thoughts.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. This movie to me felt a lot like Infinity War in that it was the perfect movie for what it was supposed to be. Infinity War was kind of like our hero's loss, and it was a movie that brought in elements from all these past 10 years of movies, but really like showed, wow, these heroes that we have followed and loved so much lost. And that was a very effective way of doing a movie. It wasn't a movie that could stand alone, and I would say this one cannot stand alone as well. If you haven't seen any Marvel movies in the last 2 years, you will be lost. You will be so confused. Absolutely. And that's okay. For what it was, a gift wrapping of the past 11 years of movies, this movie, I feel like, nailed it and knocked it out of the park. I think I would like to say right now that this movie emphasizes the value of rewatching movies. To those of you who think rewatching movies is a waste of time, I vehemently disagree with you. Any good work of art, good art will reward a closer look, a second opinion. Bad art will further confirm that it's bad. This happens so many times in films. We talked about this in the last episode with The Last Jedi. You and I, we both came out of that movie thinking it was the worst movie ever, and Rian Johnson just took a dump all over our childhoods, and it was ugly. But after seeing it again, I think, for me at least, I think it's now one of the best movies that Disney has made in the new Star Wars era. And I think because it's a good work of art, it rewards you for coming back to it and sitting with it again, seeing details again, and reanalyzing what the movie is trying to say. And I think Endgame is the same way for me. I will be honest and say, after the first time, though we had a blast, like we had so much fun, I had a lot of lingering questions about the mechanics of the rules of the film, why things were presented the way they were. I came out of it feeling like it was lazy because they didn't properly explain some of the complexities of the plot. I wanted to know, I was thinking, was I being emotionally manipulated so that I would overlook the flaws of the storytelling? But I am so happy to say, after seeing it again, I am willing to admit I was so wrong on so much of that stuff. I relearned so much about the movie. I learned about the mechanics and how the rules actually work. And we'll go more into that later in spoilers. But I just think there's so much value in thinking. We live in such a reactive world, especially in movie fandom. But thinking, processing, analyzing something you watch to really get what they're trying to tell you is so important, I think. And I know this is super meta, I'm talking about this, but I came away profoundly realizing how important it is to just give things another chance if you really want to, So I love the movie for what it is. I think it's a well-crafted movie. I didn't like it at first, but I've come around, and honestly, it's such a great, wonderful love letter to Marvel and its fans and anyone who's been following for the last 18 films. So I think we've talked enough about our impressions. Maybe we can just jump into spoilers now.
Yeah, definitely.
I think the statute of limitation is over. Like, spoilers are okay. But if you haven't seen the movie yet, this is your fair warning right here, right now. So let's dive into this. The movie is over 3 hours long and has dozens of moments that we could get into. So we're going to approach this by going plot by plot as best as we can, and we'll comment on each section of the film and kind of go from there. You ready?
Ready.
All right, let's do this. So the very beginning of the movie is Hawkeye and his family.
Yeah, how great is this opening?
Yes.
You know, we know this movie is over 3 hours long. There's so much stuff to get to. We know the budget's over $300 million, but it starts with this small scene that could have been from a drama or like a suspense film. We begin with a quiet scene with our human characters, and we see the horrors of the snap in a relatable way, where a man loses his wife and his 2 kids. They just disappear and vanish when he turns around, and they're gone. And so we don't start on a macro level with the superheroes, but we start with regular, everyday people like us. And I loved how it opened. It grounds the movie emotionally. It makes it relatable because, Hawkeye's just a regular guy. He's just good at shooting arrows. He doesn't have any superpowers. And I felt like he was sort of the connective tissue to the audience. So I love this intimate opening. And it kind of shows that this event, this snap, is a global event. It affected everybody. Even this guy living on a random farm, his family disappears too. And it kind of connects to Ant-Man and the Wasp. That was another movie that came out after Infinity War, and then we saw how that's the snap affected those characters too.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It was a bold choice, I think, for such an event film to start so quietly. I think you would initially think, man, we should probably jump right in. This is a 3-hour movie, and we need to cover all the ground we can, and to slow things way down like this, even in the next section, is really, really a good storytelling choice. I came away from that beginning montage thinking, wow, that was effective, and it really grounds how brutal and heartbreaking this tragedy was for so many people. I think there was like a collective sigh in the theater, just go like, wow, like I can't believe we just saw that. So that was a great opening sequence.
And it must have been terrifying too for Hawkeye, because he's been out of the game for a while.
Yeah. And
he's just chilling on his farm with his kids, and then this thing happens, and he's in the middle of nowhere. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's horrifying to see. I just pictured my own family, my wife and my kid disappearing like that.
Before hot dogs, like that's the most heartbreaking thing of all. I would have been mad. I mean,
so you've seen the movie twice. Yeah. They were making hot dogs. I don't remember that.
Yeah, they were talking about mustard. Who puts mustard or mayo on hot dogs or something like that?
Oh, okay.
Another cool detail I saw was that Clint had a house arrest bracelet thing around.
Oh, right, like Ant-Man.
Yeah, so he was. It's a small little detail, but it explains why he's been out of the game. He's under house arrest. He took a deal from the government to stay at home. I just picture it as maybe like a soldier who came back from war, finally feels like he can live in peace with his family, and suddenly they're gone. That's so traumatizing, and explains the choices he makes later in the film, I feel. So should we move to the next section?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's move on.
We're taking these synopses off of Wikipedia, but we're trying to make them a little shorter for podcast form. So the next section finds us with Nebula and Tony Stark in deep space, which I thought was really funny, with Nebula and Tony Stark playing paper football, that game where they were trying to win. And Nebula is this android robotic war weapon who's has to resort to playing games with Tony Stark, and I just thought that was a really cute dynamic between them. An unnecessary friendship, but they were able to find some friendship in playing a game. And I really loved when Nebula was like, I would like to play again, just with a straight face. I thought that part was really affecting, especially when Tony starts to record himself a message to Pepper and then falls asleep, and Nebula helping him sleep in the chair. Do you want to talk about that before we move to the rest of this section?
Yeah, it was pretty depressing seeing our heroes defeated, and they show them in defeat, just waiting to die.
Yeah.
This is a place that I didn't think we would find any of these characters in. And you're seeing the effects of Infinity War, how devastating that was.
Yeah. And then, of course, Carol Danvers, the Superman of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, arrives and rescues them and returns them to Earth, where Natasha Romanoff, Black Widow, Bruce Banner, Hulk, Steve Rogers, Captain America, Rocket, Thor, Pepper Potts, and James Rhodey are waiting. They are able to track down Thanos to his planet, which has very Garden of Eden vibes to it. He's living as a sensitive, humble farmer who's just trying to make his way in the universe. They find him, they track him down, and only to find that he has gotten rid of the Infinity Stones. He's destroyed them, which means that they are unable to reverse the effects. This was their last chance to try to reverse the effects of the snapping, and they lose it. They lose the chance because they found out Thanos destroyed them. Mike, can you tell us about the scene? Oh, and I mean, how do they deal with this news?
This whole sequence completely flipped my expectations upside down. I thought this was the plot of the movie, trying to get to Thanos, reverse the snap. And I think that's what most people were expecting the movie to be about and to build up to. Instead, we get all this within the first 15 to 20 minutes. And I was shocked. My jaw dropped. I remember turning to you and telling you, I freaking love this.
Yeah.
And then the movie continues to subvert expectations, right? They find Thanos. Okay, so then I'm wondering at that point, wow, what are they going to do next? Like, where can they go? They found him, and then he's destroyed the stones. Thor walks up to him and chops his head off, decapitates him. He went for the head, quoting a line from Infinity War. The film fades out as Thor walks away. Not really in triumph, right? Because even though they kill Thanos, you don't feel like they won. They still lost, and it's a definitive loss, and they're just kind of, they're not able to do anything about it. And I think the movie further continues to subvert expectations when it cuts to black, and then we see the title card 5 years later.
Yes.
Like, holy crap. I have no idea what this movie is going to be about. And I absolutely love this feeling. I think the fact that they were able to achieve this without a single leak and without a hint in the trailers, like, we didn't know this was going to happen. I thought it was amazing. Like, for a movie this big to have not a single hint on what it's about. Like, after the first 15, 20 minutes, like, this movie could go anywhere. And yeah, that's just exciting for a big movie, big blockbuster movie like this to kind of flip the script on the audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like what you said about how though they technically beat him in the end, it didn't feel like victory. And you see Thor kind of trudging out the front door as it fades away, and you realize, wow, he's not triumphant here. He looks defeated. And it really just throws us off. Like, I think we really, as an audience, are brought into the minds of our heroes at this point, with just how it's shot and the delivery of this scene. It just feels like, wow, like, what do we do now? There's nothing else we could do. And they lost so definitively. And the fact that it then cuts to 5 years later throws us even more into this uncertainty of, it's been 5 years. What happened then? Did they win? Did they find out how to do it? But no, it wasn't. It cuts to 5 years later, and everything's gone to hell, really. There's been no change. Everyone's just trying to rebuild their lives. But it takes us into the next section. So 5 years later, we find that Scott Lang, who is Ant-Man, finds a way to escape from the quantum realm. For those of you who are not familiar with what happens in Ant-Man's solo movie after Infinity War, he enters the quantum realm and is supposed to be brought out, but Hank Pym, Hope Van Dyne, and her mom, Michelle Pfeiffer, all get dusted, and he gets left in the quantum realm for the next 5 years until the true hero of this movie, the Disney mouse rescues him by accidentally tripping. No.
It could have been Remy from Ratatouille.
It could have been. It's all connected. The rat rescues him by accidentally scrambling over the machine and lets him out. He then finds out he's been gone for 5 years, goes to the Avengers compound and finds Natasha and Captain America, and suggests that because he made it back and went through time, what if they could find a way to bring back the stones and reverse everything that happened?
The moment Scott Lang brings up time travel, I think of myself, oh my gosh, are they going to do it?
Yes.
Are they going to go back to the other movies? Are they going to pull a Back to the Future Part 2? And I felt like this segment did such a great setup for the stakes for these characters. First of all, the mention of time travel. Who knew that this was going to be a time travel movie? But lo and behold, that's what it was, and they really delivered the goods for this. And I like how they didn't rush into the time travel. They like what we were talking about in the beginning with the moment with Hawkeye. This movie is it's a big blockbuster movie, but they're not afraid of these quiet moments. They're not afraid to just spend some more time with these characters, show where they're at, and to develop some stakes for them. For instance, Scott Lang, we spend a considerable time with him after he gets out of the quantum realm. He's running around San Francisco, figuring out what happens. It's essentially his movie for like 10 minutes. And he sees this memorial where there are all the names of the people who were snapped, and he finds his own name. And eventually he tracks down his daughter, which is, he's so relieved to see again. And we later see Tony Stark, who they need to help. They need his help to build the time machine. And we know that Tony Stark survived, and and Pepper survived, and they now have a daughter. And Scott Lang has his daughter. So they actually have no personal reason to risk the status quo. Their lives are good. They all survived. They were able to move on from the snap. And I love the struggle with these characters. Like, should we risk and sacrifice and lay down these things that we've been given, this gift of family, for the sake of other people who lost so much? And how can they not, right? How can they move on and live where, if they know that there's this possibility of, helping the rest of humanity? I love the moral stakes that were set up during this. Yeah. But I think it just gave the characters more flesh and blood type feeling to them. Where I think a lot of these superhero movies, the main critique is that there aren't any stakes. You don't really feel like there's any payoff for it. But I think this movie totally earns it.
Yeah, I agree. It actually pulls us as an audience into the moral quandary too. The life that Tony and Pepper are able to carve out with their daughter, essentially moving on from the past and building a new life, actually makes us wonder. At least for me, I found myself wondering, should they even try to bring this back? Because people are able to move on. We see that there is hope there. The fact that Tony and Pepper were able to have a child in the middle of this all shows us that there's positives almost to keeping it this way and not going back. There's even one line where Cap is telling Natasha, like, there's whales in the river, and the water's never been cleaner, because there's less people now, there's less pollution, the environment's improving. That's almost like, whoa, should we just keep it this way? It's almost like Thanos was right. And I love that they ask that question of us in showing it, and they kind of ask us, what do you think? Do you think we should continue, almost, as an audience? And I found myself drifting towards, well, this is beautiful. Like, Tony's able to finally live in peace. He has a second chance, but we find later that, some can move on, but not us. you know. So I love that, but as heroes are, they can't do that. They can't live on without when a chance to save everyone is presented to them. And we see that Tony has been working on a time travel idea as well. We see him experimenting with it, and he's able to find a successful model for it, but that's for a later section. Any other thoughts on this part before we move on?
Yeah, I think just talking about heroism, Zack Snyder recently made comments about Batman versus Superman and just about his decisions to present a darker side of these superheroes. You know, in reality, heroes are not perfect like what's presented on screen. They embezzle money, they make mistakes, sometimes they do things that are very dark and morally questionable. And that's why he has Batman mass murdering people. And that's why he has Superman being reluctant to be Superman. Not to criticize Zack Snyder. He's an amazing visual artist. I just don't personally agree with his take on superheroes. That's not what I personally want when I go see these movies.
They're aspirational, you know. They're people that we can aspire to be like. That's interesting you say that, because I did feel like there were some elements of this film that furthered this almost postmodern view of heroism, in that they deconstruct some of our heroes. We see later, like, I think we'll get to it, but we do see later that some of these heroes are kind of messed up, are fallible, and anyway, we can get to that at a later point.
Yeah. We'll go back to this point later.
Yeah, that's a great talking point. Stick with us. We'll get there. So next section, the Avengers, at least what's left of them, go to Bruce Banner, who it seems has become the Hulk permanently, with hipster glasses and a tweed sweatshirt and everything.
He's Hulk and Bruce Banner at the same time.
Right, which I think was a pretty great choice. Was really funny, but it was kind of cool to see him in full control of the Hulk identity. They turn to him for help. He's one of the smartest men in the world, but he is unable to really construct a working time machine also, because they need Tony's mind as well, to help complete the project. But we see later that why don't we talk about the Hulk Banner blend a little more? What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think the fact that he's Hulk and Banner at the same time, I think this kind of defined his character's arc, in that his arc is now complete. You know, in the Incredible Hulk, Bruce Banner is afraid of turning into the Hulk. He's almost ashamed of it and tries to suppress it and control the Hulk. In the Avengers, he learns how to control it through his anger and, decides to use the Hulk for good. And in Thor Ragnarok and Infinity War, it seems like he has a difficulty balancing the Hulk, right, trying to bring it out, or he's afraid that if he turns into the Hulk, he'll stay the Hulk forever. And I think this ability to control the Hulk and be both Hulk and Banner at the same time, it's like just a look of the character. It's like, okay, his arc is now complete. Like, yeah, by this film, he's mastered it. He's the great Jedi.
He's found balance.
Yeah, true balance.
Yeah, I loved it from an aesthetic standpoint. Seeing Hulk as a hipster basically was really funny. But yeah, it felt like he was at peace with it, which makes him even more effective, I feel. We find that Tony Stark, when he makes his own breakthrough, decides he has to help. There's a great scene when he's talking to Pepper about it and says, "I found the solution, but I could stop it right now. I could drop this solution into the middle of the lake and no one would know, and we can just live our lives." But Pepper made this point of like, you couldn't ever live with yourself or rest if you decide to do that. And he's right, and she's right. He can't. So we've seen that he is possessed with this need to protect the world from Thanos.
And it's powerful because that was 5 years ago. They lost 5 years ago. Yeah. Everybody, the world has moved on. When you have a loved one who's passed away, 5 years later, those wounds eventually heal. I mean, you definitely love that person so much and you miss them, but you know, you do heal over time, and you do find ways to move on. And I just love the scenario that they've created for these characters, and like knowing that they can go back and like reverse all that. And to risk their own personal, you know, families and loved ones to do so.
I think it's powerful, and it sets Tony on this journey of, it's kind of like in the hero's journey, he decides to finally take the call and help. And we find that him and Banner together, they come to the solution. They are actually going to go time traveling, which is just so epic.
A time heist, as
Scott Lang said. That's right. And I do want to just kind of do a little explanation of the time travel rules, because I was the biggest I was the biggest dissident to it. I hated it at first. I thought it was convoluted and they didn't explain the rules, but they did.
I actually was really confused the first time they explained it. They threw a lot of pop culture references in there.
Yeah, to throw us off, I feel, almost.
Yeah, and I was like, wait, what?
Yeah. For example, there was one part where Scott Lang, he just kind of says, oh yeah, we know the rules. We shouldn't interact with ourselves in the past. We shouldn't do this, this, and that. But he was just making a flippant thing. That was not actually a rule that they set. It was just like someone going like, we know how this works because we've seen Back to the Future or something like that, right? But that's actually not what Bruce or Tony said. They didn't say that was a part of the rules. In fact, the way to explain it is they actually view time as linear. It's constantly going. Even if they enter the past through interdimensional travel, they are still living in their own reality. Like they're in the present still. Like I think of it, this is my analogy. I'm ready to unveil this analogy to you. For those of you who grew up in the 90s, which a lot of us did, and to you who didn't, I'm sorry. You might not get this at all. But you remember those VCRs we had growing up where we would record something on the TV? That tape was moving forward constantly, and it was recording what the TV was showing. This movie is like if you changed the input to another channel and that was showing like a rerun or a show we'd seen before. The tape is still moving forward, but it's recording things from the past. So what it means is, though the tape is rolling forward in one direction constantly, they're actually kind of writing something new onto the tape as they go on. So they're still proceeding in one direction time-wise, but even though they're going backwards, it's still their future.
I think that's a really interesting analogy. I've never heard of it explained in that way. I'm actually planning on rewatching the movie tomorrow, so I'm going to keep that analogy in mind of the VCR, and I'll let you know if it makes more sense to me.
Yeah, I think the main thing to keep in mind with this time travel stuff, as tempting as it is for our brains to go, they just jumped backwards, it's still forward for them. Does that make sense? So they're still going forward in one direction. Even if they're jumping back in time, they're in some ways writing new realities into their own. But it's still one reality for them.
So let me ask you, if they're changing, if it's one reality, one timeline, they go back, they change something, they go back to their future, I mean, wouldn't there be some kind of ripple effect from the past?
There isn't, because those pasts are not like influencing their future. So they even made a point to say Back to the Future does not apply in this situation. You know how in Back to the Future, it's like, be careful what you do in the past because it could rewrite your future and make you disappear and all this stuff. In this case, they set the rules very clearly that quantum realm time travel does not change anything that was in the past because it's already happened for them. But you see when Hulk runs into the Ancient One in New York, which we'll talk about later, she says, I'm not giving you this stone because you're going to change my reality. It might work for you, but it's going to change mine, which is when they decide, once we're done with these stones, we'll put them back in these realities. So the the convoluted and the simplified answer to this is one timeline, and going back will not change their timeline at all. It will only give them the chance to unwrite what Thanos did, but going backwards did not change their own past because it's already in the past.
I'm wondering if this would have been easier to explain or understand for audiences if they just explained it in terms of branch realities or alternate timelines. Like maybe there was one timeline, but the moment they go back and change something, it creates another reality, another alternate reality.
Did explain that though.
So it is a branching timeline.
It is a branching timeline unless they went back and put the stones back where they got them.
So putting the stones back closes off the branches.
Yeah, would close off the branches. However, there is one instance they did not put the stone back. It's in New York when Loki got the Tesseract and disappeared. Of course, they can't put it back there anymore. So that opened a new branch in the timeline. So that's one instance of a timeline branching out. But yeah, so if you have tuned out at this point, I'm so sorry. Let's move on.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about we can dedicate an entire episode to talking about the mechanics of time travel in this film.
Maybe we will. We'll see.
I don't know if it's worth it.
Yeah.
We'll get like one view. It's going to be like us.
Us
checking to see if it uploaded correctly.
So once the Avengers come together and realize time travel is possible, they decide we need to get the team back together. So Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow, she travels to Japan to retrieve Clint Barton, who has become a vigilante. He's become Ronin, Ronin, the character, not the Kree Ronin, but like a Japanese Ronin who goes around killing criminals. And she basically she tells him that there's a chance to rewrite everything and what happens there.
Yeah, Hawkeye has this line in response to Black Widow telling him that they think they can bring everyone back. He tells her, no, don't give me hope. And I thought that was really powerful. Like, this is a man he's clearly moved on, and he's dedicated his entire life to murdering gangsters and scum. And I think any glimmer of hope, I think any possible chance of failure, and having that hope that they can come back is like, it's not worth it for him.
Yeah.
Only to have himself be crushed again.
Yeah. The way he says, "Don't give me hope," was so heartbreaking. He's a man who's haunted by a lack of hope. And what she tells him like makes it even more emotional. She says, "I'm sorry I didn't give you hope sooner." And I found that to be super affecting. Oh, yeah. I'm really surprised that Hawkeye he's actually one of the emotional cores of the film. Yeah. That was a surprising move on their part because we haven't seen him in a while. Yeah.
I mean, especially because he spends all of Avengers 1 as like a zombie.
Right. One of Loki's zombies. And all of Avengers 2, like, ineffectively firing arrows at people.
Yeah.
So they attempt to bring the team back together, and the movie starts to move along a lot faster. They time travel. They go back to events that they went back to. I feel like at this point, why don't we talk a little bit about, maybe we can each share our favorite moments they time traveled back to, and then we can move into the final act.
Yes. I mean, clear right off the bat, New York City, 2012.
Yes.
They showed exact shots from the first Avengers film in the Battle of New York, and the audience just erupted. And I loved Back to the Future too. I think my favorite part about that movie was when they go back to the events of the first film, and they're trying not to interact with the characters and the events in that movie. And we get that here. It's just like walking us down, giving us these callbacks and nuggets. We get to see what happened after Avengers, when they all gang up on Loki, and he's like, I'll have that drink. Yes. And we see what happens. Like, the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents come in from Winter Soldier, and then they collect the Tesseract.
Rumlow and all of Hydra comes and collects the Tesseract.
Right, and then, they make comments about Captain America's outfit because they're seeing him from a distance.
Yes.
And, we have a recreation of one of the coolest scenes in the MCU, the elevator scene from Winter Soldier. Captain America finds himself again in an elevator with almost the same guys. And I thought, oh my gosh, are they going to fight again? And then the way the scene ends it's just brilliant, Yes. Yeah. I mean, this is what everything's culminated into, like he takes a briefcase and it's okay. Hail Hydra.
And all of the Hydra agents are like, oh, I guess he is in on it. And he walks away with the scepter. And so good.
Yeah. I think that part, I think I was like jumping out of my seat. Like I was just leaping.
Corroborate that.
Yeah. You kind of lose words to describe these moments. But these are moments that have been with us as an audience for years. And to go back and to revisit them in this way, it's just, there's no other way to describe it. It's fun. It's so much joy in it. And I feel like if you don't feel happy or excited at all seeing this stuff, I feel like you're like dead inside. How can you not be happy?
I know. Unless you really aren't a fan of this stuff and only watch Terrence Malick films, and which, I mean, more power to you, but this stuff is chill-inducing, like get you out of your seat moments, and it's totally fan service in the best possible way. What did you think of Cap versus Cap?
That part was cool.
Yeah.
It wasn't like my favorite moment out of this stuff, but he had some funny lines. I like how
Bucky was what got the other guy to go.
Yeah.
What?
The very mention of Bucky's name, Captain America just, huh?
Oh, that's such a great little moment. I loved how the past Captain America says, I can do this all day, and our current day Cap says, yes, I know.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
So good. So that's your favorite moment, New York. Thanks for taking that. I would have said that, but another moment I really liked that they went back to was when Peter Quill, Chris Pratt's character, is on it wasn't Vormir. What's the planet called?
The
planet at the
beginning of Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yes, we see footage from that movie again. Star-Lord dancing around while listening to his Walkman. But my favorite part of that sequence was when the music stops and you just see Chris Pratt dancing in a circle like, come and get your love.
It's like Nebula and War Machine. They're like watching him.
Observing this bumbling fool who's about to acquire a Power Stone, an Infinity Stone, dancing around. Such a great moment. All of Star-Lord's moments in this movie cracked me up so much. So I'd say that's my favorite moment. Getting to see, honestly, one of the best MCU films from a different perspective was a real treat. Yeah, I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about Vormir, though, between Clint Barton and Natasha Romanoff.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. We know when the moment they arrive, we know what's going to happen. One of them has to die to get the Soul Stone. And I thought this scene, in principle, I think the scene sounded really good. Like, they're both fighting each other to earn the right to sacrifice themselves and to lay their lives down. But when we see it on screen, it looks really silly. Like, he's like shooting bombs at her so he can jump off the cliff. I think after, they kept fighting, and after a while, I'm like, this is kind of like a cartoon. Like, oh, I'm going to kill myself. No, yeah. I'm going to kill myself.
And in the slow motion of them running towards the ledge.
Yeah. Right. But when the deed is done, when Black Widow lets go, I didn't know she was going to be one of the characters to die in this movie. And
none of us did.
Yeah, and even though she isn't one of the forefront characters like Captain America and Iron Man level, like, you still are attached to this character. You've seen her so much throughout the years in these Avengers films and Captain America. So yeah, it was sad to see her die. But I think in terms of storytelling, it makes sense because Barton's the one with wife and kids. She has no immediate family like that.
She was able to give her life for her
Right,
found
yeah.
family.
And I think this movie also earns that, like the relationship between these two characters. Like
I was going to ask you that. Did you kind of? It's been a while since we've seen Barton and Romanoff interacting. Did you buy that emotional moment between them?
Yeah, I mean, it made sense that these two are the ones to go there to get the Soul Stone.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it was really effective. They used the same musical score as in Infinity War when Gamora gets dropped. They use the same music to kind of bring us back to that point of... I felt heartbroken when Gamora got thrown down in Infinity War, and it took me right back to that place of like sorrow, even though it was Thanos who was doing the sacrificing. And I really loved when Barton wakes up with the Soul Stone in his hand and he just kind of punches the water, like, because of the cost. It cost him so much. It cost him a dear friend of his to acquire the Soul Stone. And I think in that moment you could see him going like, this better freaking work, or this will not have been worth it.
He's lost too much already.
He's lost so much. Yeah. So I thought that part was really great. It goes back to what you said. Clint Barton was kind of one of the emotional centers of the film, unexpectedly.
Can we talk about Captain America at the end of, at the end of the movie, Captain America has to go back in time to return all the stones. I wonder what he thought when he went back to Vormir and saw the Red Skull. Can we see that movie?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I want to see that.
Yeah, like he's like, hey.
The last time you saw him was like 80 years ago in his first movie or something.
Right, yeah.
And he got beamed up into space, and now he's a floating apparition on some planet that has an eternal solar eclipse. Yeah. It's like, what the? That is, yeah. I want to see that now. Thanks a lot. Now I know we're missing something in our lives. Should we talk about the end since we're there at this point? Or?
Yeah, let's move on to the final third act.
Okay. The end game. So, okay, let's talk about the battle. Sorry about that.
They go back to the present day.
They go like my brain's fried from all the time travel and stuff. They're back to the present day. They have the stones. They actually succeed in re-bringing back everyone. Bruce Banner, aka Thor, takes the new Infinity Gauntlet. Hulk. Oh, we haven't even talked about Fat Thor.
Oh gosh, Fat Thor. Yeah, we haven't talked about him. I think we should talk about him now. Yeah, because this is Fat Thor, top 3 favorite Marvel characters of all time. I think Fat Thor drew the loudest laughs in our theater throughout the entire movie. Yes. And he's just like a long running gag throughout the entire film. Yeah. Like you first see him and he's like sitting in a meeting. And he looks like the dude from Big Lebowski. Yeah.
Actually, Tony Stark says that.
Oh,
he says, "Step aside, Lebowski."
Oh. I mean, they're having a meeting and they're talking about how to save the world, and they turn to him and ask him about the ether. And he's just sitting there with his sunglasses on, not moving.
And Natasha says, "Is he asleep?" And then Rhodey says, "Oh, I think he's dead."
He does? Oh my gosh. I can't wait to see this again.
Great moment. And then he gives his explanation. The ether is actually not really a stone. You see, it was actually a little gooey thing. And then Jane Foster, she was an old flame of mine who stuck her hand in the stone, and then it stuck itself inside of her. And then it's just like this convoluted, drunken haze of an explanation. It was so funny.
I think at the end, so they do the snap, and then we don't know if everyone has come back yet, but then Thanos has come back from 2014, and then
he found a way to commandeer the technology that brought them into the present time. They made it. They time travel to the future,
and so it's Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor versus Thanos. And I just love, since we're on the topic of Fat Thor, I love how he, reaches for the heavens, gets his hammer back. There's all this lightning that strikes him. I thought he was going to go back to his, normal physique.
Yes.
The only thing that changes about him is that his beard is now braided, but he's still this fat guy.
Yeah, I thought his muscles would like melt back into place,
Yeah, but nope, they charge in, and then it's still Fat Thor running towards Thanos.
You see his armor just bulging as he runs forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at first I found this to be quite annoying. Just the idea that like our great heroes are now like deadbeat drunkards. And I feel like there's a conversation to be had about a postmodern look at heroes. Even in The Last Jedi, Luke Skywalker was this like deadbeat, take no action, broken down old man. In this movie, Thor is much the same way. He's this broken, fat drunkard who is playing Fortnite all day in his little house with Korg, which I'm so glad that we saw Korg.
Oh, I'm so glad they survived the snap.
Yeah, I know. I was so happy.
Korg and Meek.
Those were the ones we were the most afraid would be gone. And there's something to be said about this view of deconstructing our heroes into very fallen, flawed people that I don't find very helpful. A friend of mine and I were talking about it, and he was saying kids want to dress up as superheroes. They want to aspire to something greater. They want heroes are important in our lives. I feel like it gives us something to aspire to be like. You wanted to be Batman growing up. I wanted to be Luke Skywalker growing up. But showing kids their heroes in a broken state, like fat and depressed and weak, crying constantly throughout the movie, I feel like is an interesting choice. And I found that to be really grating on me after seeing it a first time. But I think now it's a little less of a cynical reimagining of heroism. I think what they did really was just lean into Chris Hemsworth as a great comedic actor. They found out somewhere along the way in these last 10 years that Chris Hemsworth is a really funny guy. And I think they just leaned into that and said, let's just really let this actor become this funny. We saw it in Thor Ragnarok, and I think that was the best Thor movie, right? Because Chris Hemsworth was just a funny guy. He wasn't like this. And if you go back to the old MCU movies, you see him talking in these and thous, and it just doesn't feel right somehow. But when he's being hilarious and almost like the dude, it works a lot better. And so I would say, though I do still think there's something to be said about modern storytellers breaking heroism down, I think in this particular case, it was just, let's do something funny with Chris Hemsworth. And I'm willing to let that go because it was so funny.
I think you touched upon like the right way to do it. Yeah. If you want to deconstruct and kind of show the vulnerable side of these heroes, like, Thor failed. Like he was the one who could have delivered the final blow to Thanos in Infinity War. He should have gone for the head, but he didn't finish doing what he was supposed to do, and he kind of like puts all that on himself. Yeah. And I feel like
broken person. Right?
Yeah, he's broken. He's clearly has like PTSD. Yeah. The very mention of the name Thanos makes him, like. He's like cowering fury, like please don't say his name. But I feel like you touched upon, you said, this is a very uncynical way to deconstruct a hero. And I totally agree. Like you can deconstruct heroes, but I mean, you have to offer people hope. Otherwise it's bleak, it's crushing. And, kids are watching these movies. And like you said, we want to aspire to something greater. We want role models. We want people, we want the highest virtues,
but the point is, I think with Thor, it was a good way to deconstruct him, and I do feel like he did have redemption in this film in some way when he brought in Stormbreaker and his hammer Mjolnir and summon thunder, that was like him going like, I am still the god of thunder. I do not like that he left New Asgard to Valkyrie. I thought that was really weird, a weird choice. But if that gives us him with the Guardians of the Galaxy in Volume 3, I'm all for it.
Oh gosh, that movie is gonna make boatloads of money.
Oh my goodness, so
like
much
definitely over $1 billion for sure.
Yeah.
As Guardians of the Universe, they gotta call it that. It has to be the Guardians of the Galaxy logo with an AS in front of it.
Yes.
Don't call it Volume 3. Call it As Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
But
we get too distracted.
Yeah, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, we are.
Let's get to the final battle.
Yes. Okay.
Lots to talk about here.
I want to hear your thoughts because I think you liked it more than I did.
The final battle?
Yes.
The reintroduction of our dusted heroes. They're introduced. So Thor, Captain America, Iron Man, they're fighting Thanos. They're getting beaten. He's just too strong. He doesn't even have the Infinity Stones, and he's already like beating them. So we see how strong of a villain he is by himself. And Captain America, and then his army approaches, and Captain America is just standing there, ready to give his dying breath to fight. And then we hear, what does he say? Like, on your left?
Yes. Do you remember that reference?
Of course.
Yeah.
Like Winter Soldier, I've watched it many times over the past couple of years, and that's one of the funniest lines in the movie. I think just the image of the portals opening, and you see characters and armies from each film. You see Wakandans from Black Panther. You see all the wizards, the sorcerers from Doctor Strange. You see all the Asgardians and freaking Valkyrie on a flying horse.
Yes.
I mean, oh my gosh,
That was a great moment.
I'm at a loss for words.
Yeah.
We as kids, we played with action figures of all these heroes. We had trading cards. I was just showing my wife the other day the trading cards I used to have as a kid. It shows strength, intelligence, stamina, and all that. Their stats for all these characters. And I used to collect these cards, and then I had a folder with all of them, and then just picturing them coming to life.
So you were Agent Coulson.
Yeah, exactly.
Trading cards.
And I mean, this movie understands. It understands how we grew up. It understands all of our fantasies, and it gives it to us. And that moment is just a representation of all that. I thought Civil War was that. And no, this is the pinnacle of superhero movies. It gave it. I don't know if this moment can ever be topped, because they have all these actors under contract. The portal opens and then Hope Van Dyne shows up, the Wasp. She's in this movie too.
Yeah. Pepper Potts in an Iron Man.
Pepper Potts in Iron Man suit.
Yeah. That was a surprise. I didn't expect that.
It's just so good. And then, Captain Marvel comes in, and, it's just all hell breaks loose, and it's just a glorious battle scene. We've seen stuff in Lord of the Rings, but I don't think there's anything like this, where we can call out the names of more than a dozen characters.
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings, Saving Private Ryan, all these battle scenes, we know 3 or 4 characters' names, but this is I think the only moment that could top this, now that Disney owns Fox, is if we had an X-Men and Avengers scene. That is the only thing that I think will top moments in this movie, and also, but in terms of box office, we're seeing the movie break all kinds of records. I think it's going to top Avatar for worldwide gross. Avatar's at $2.7 billion. It's about to
cross $2 billion in a week and a half.
Yeah. 2 weeks of release.
Oh yeah.
Oh wait, sorry.
Oh,
a week and a half. So, what can top Endgame and moments like this in Endgame? And I think the only thing would be an X-Men versus Avengers type scene.
Oh my goodness.
I think theaters will be set on fire. I feel
it'll look like LA after the Lakers win the championship.
Oh yeah, I think things chairs are gonna be thrown, people's shirts are gonna get torn off. I know I'm gonna tear my shirt off if I ever see that. Like you don't have any way to express yourself over these moments other than to like, go crazy. Yeah, you just can't. There are no words, there are no actions, and you just kind of like, yeah, you become like an animal. You're reduced.
Well, so you know what Mike is gonna do when that inevitably happens. So, Bobby Iger, if you're listening, please make this happen. Please let this happen. I want to see this happen.
I think knowing Kevin Feige and
tear his shirt off.
We will do a podcast on it. I'll record myself do a live feed.
Oh yeah,
in the movie.
We'll do a Periscope or whatever it is in 10 years.
I mean, just talking about the X-Men, I feel like the future of the MCU, with the end of this era, I feel like it's entirely possible that within 5 years we're going to start seeing X-Men in this universe, and I feel like they're not going to introduce them in an solo X-Men movie. I feel like they're going to show up in these movies. They're going to slowly hint at it, in other characters' movies. We're going to start seeing mutants. And then I think one way to bring in mutants is Scarlet Witch, Wanda, because she is a mutant and they haven't used that term yet, but now they can. I think maybe they could start exploring her and give her a solo movie and maybe explore the fact that she has a mutation in her DNA, and this is what she is, and there are other people out there in the world like this, but they've been hiding it. I mean, and I think that totally lends into the X-Men narrative.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot that, though this is the end of a certain part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I think we're still ripe for so much more storytelling, and it's going to be, if you're getting tired of the MCU, I have bad news for you. This thing is going to keep going on, and for us, we can't wait. It's going to be great. I do want to give some thoughts on the...
Oh, just one more thing on the comment on X-Men in the MCU. I just feel like it's entirely possible if we finally get some X-Men movies in the MCU. One way to bring back the Avengers, they've introduced time travel. They can bring back Steve Rogers, Tony Stark, Thor, the original gang. Bring those people back. It'll be kind of like a Star Wars generational moment where people growing up with these movies are going to have that Force Awakens type experience. Like, oh my gosh, these characters are back now, but they're older. So I feel like it's entirely possible with these alternate realities to have X-Men and the same actors for the Avengers, in one film occupying.
Yeah, we'll see if they want to extend their contracts even longer.
Or even just contract them for one movie for like a cameo or something. Yeah.
The possibilities are certainly endless. Yeah. So I'm gonna give some thoughts on the last battle, and then we can kind of go into final thoughts after that. So I'm gonna just say I really had a lot of fun in the theater watching these characters return from the dust. I certainly was excited. However, I do have problems with the way this battle was set up in that I couldn't help but, and you're going to think I'm nitpicking, but I couldn't help but think, where in the world were all these soldiers in Infinity War? Like, where were all these thousands of nameless soldiers? We had no hint that they were on their way. We had no idea that there were armies just marshaling, ready to come out of the portals and fight Thanos' army. I would have liked a little more setup. And I'm gonna just say, I don't know how else to do it. I have no ideas on how I would do it differently. But I do wish that there was some more setup to the fact that there were thousands of nameless soldiers that just kind of appeared on the field. Either that, or I would have liked to see the heroes. There's plenty of superheroes fighting off Thanos' forces and showing off their unique abilities.
So without the armies, just the heroes themselves.
Yeah, like I would have liked to have seen the heroes show they are Earth's mightiest heroes and like fight these armies off. Granted, for the realism of it, you do need 1,000 soldiers at your side to realistically win a battle like that. But I I don't know if you kind of mentioned Lord of the Rings. I had just watched the Helm's Deep battle the night before, and that battle scene I feel is one of the most brilliantly set up battles in cinematic history. Just the tension build up, the setup of it, showing the armies slowly coming together into this one spot before they just erupt into battle. I thought was cinematic genius and was just so full of purpose, intentionality, and setup. By the time we reached this battle, while seeing the heroes coming out was so worth it, I was so excited, and I still love those moments. I found myself thinking, oh my gosh, they have a legion of troops. Where did they all come from? And if you saw in Infinity War, there were about 500 Wakandans. Suddenly there was like 10,000 of them. Where did they all come from? And I get that we need to have large armies fighting each other for a last battle to communicate scale and size. If that's the case, I want to know where they came from. Where did all these extra sorcerers come from? I thought Doctor Strange was kind of unique, and there was maybe a few others. I thought it was this small order of sorcerers, not like 5,000 of them. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. I think you can make an argument that in Infinity War, because Thanos kind of caught everybody off guard, they weren't prepared for him coming and collecting all these stones. I don't think they were even aware that Thanos existed on Earth. These people on Earth weren't aware of his existence until Hulk was beamed down. So I don't think they had the time to organize and prepare for a battle like that. But I understand what you're saying and where you're coming from, and yeah, it is just an all-out brawl. Like they're just rushing into each other and just launching all their projectile powers onto the nameless army. So I think it's been a while since I've seen Lord of the Rings too. So I didn't mean to call out and
no.
Yeah, I'm not bashing that movie in any way. I just remember not feeling as invested with the characters but it's not a fair comparison either. Yeah. Because we've had so many movies with these people.
So I don't think my problem necessarily is with the story. At that point, like, it's okay. This is the end game. It's the final battle. I just think from a movie making storytelling standpoint, like the technique of storytelling, I would have liked to have seen at least hints that there was a growing army, like, getting ready somehow throughout the movie in some way. And again, like I said earlier, I don't know how I would do it differently. The Russo brothers had so much on their plate to do, and they executed this movie as well as you could possibly imagine them doing. I just have that one little gripe about the battle. Like, couldn't we have seen a little more hinting that this legion of armies is on its way? Even like maybe in like a news broadcast, like there are pockets of resistance throughout the world, like starting to form, violence is escalating, something to show there are troops, there are people rising up. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. I don't know. Like, again, I don't know how I would do it differently, or just maybe reduce the size of the army and emphasize that the heroes, our heroes that we've waited so long in this movie to finally arrive, are enough to fight these armies off.
I think you bring up a good point about what if we just had the heroes come through the portals and it's the dozen heroes that we have fighting off an entire army. I think that would have conveyed like the depth of their powers, like how strong they are. They're able to take on Thanos' armies and also single-handedly defeat them. Yeah.
We waited a whole movie to see these guys come back, but instead we saw like a bunch of CGI soldiers like fighting. Like it kind of almost, in my mind, kind of almost cheapened the impact that our heroes had. They won because of all the other people with them. And it's this inclusive like message, I think, but we paid those tickets to see our heroes fight, not an army fighting off, But again, it's a small gripe. It's not enough to like ruin the movie for me. And when the Avengers theme do 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 as they rush into each other, that is just hair-raising stuff. Yeah. So I'm not saying the execution was poor. I just would have liked to have seen a little less of like a little less of the storytellers asking us as the audience to make that like logical jump with them. Like, oh, of course there's a legion of armies ready to fight. Like, no, I don't accept that. I think you should tell us a little more that they're on their way or that there's something brewing. Otherwise it just feels very like, okay, the movie's almost over. Let's just throw these armies at each other. But you know, when I let's get to that climactic moment. I think when Tony, yeah,
You know, those criticisms are all valid on the final fight, and I totally see what you're saying. And I think this is what I mean when I said in the beginning, this movie has flaws. It has a lot of shortcomings, things that you can nitpick or even criticize about. But I think what this movie offers in terms of the experience and the joy of giving us the moments that we want as fans, I think that, you know, it completely overshadows these things. Like, I don't care anymore. Like, I don't care that time travel mechanics were unclear to me the first time. I don't care that, you know, some things don't make sense, they don't add up, or they could have developed things differently. This movie is so much fun, and the feelings that it gave me is what I'm always going to remember. And, you know, I think when coming back to this movie, I don't know, we'll see tomorrow after I see it again. But I just, it's those moments I keep going back to. I don't think about time travel is really confusing.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, Mike. I think that cinema, right? We've talked about this in the past, but I think cinema is about how it makes you feel. It's like an emotional experience just as much as it's an intellectual experience. And I think the purpose of this movie is to like hit us right in the feels, you know, to pay off the last 11 years we've lived, laughed, cried with these characters. And I think at some point, this stuff doesn't matter. It's how we like the feelings of triumph that we are able to share with these heroes is it kind of just, that's the point, right? That's the point of cinema, is to make us feel and think and experience something like with a lot of joy.
I think, you know, there are a lot of trolls and critics online who I think kind of miss the point of film and cinema and art. It's not for you to nitpick at. It's not for you. You know, it doesn't have to make all logical sense. Like it can't be like foolproof, like airtight. If that's what you're looking for, I think, you know, people deny themselves the pleasure of what these movies have to offer and what, you know, the experiences. I would encourage anyone who's overly critical like that. Like, dude, just that's not the point of movies. That's not the, you know, you don't go there to outsmart the movie. You're there to, it's totally like an emotional thing.
Yeah. So I think, though there are some flaws to it, I don't think they're enough to make this movie any less than what it is. And that is a wonderful, joyful experience wrapped around some sorrow at the beginning, right? Can we talk about the final moment though, when the snap, yes. As you know, if you've listened this far, you saw this movie, but Tony Stark is the one who ends this. The same character we began this journey with back in 2008. The same character who brashly declared in a press conference, "I am Iron Man," finishes this story saying the same thing. As he's about to snap, he says, "I am Iron Man," and snaps his fingers and ends it. That moment was so powerful to me. I felt my eyes welling up as I saw Tony Stark, this flawed hero who we've seen like mess up spectacularly while also trying so hard and desperately to save the world that he actually wants to save and protect, finally finishing the deed.
You know, just to comment on that moment, I think I read an article this week about that line, "I am Iron Man," and they were actually trying to figure out like what he should say because they felt like something was missing from the moment. I forgot what it originally was, but he didn't say "I am Iron Man."
Oh, interesting.
And they're going through it. They're going through all these different lines, and nothing really felt that impactful. And then it was actually the editor of the film who said, "Hey, what if he says I am Iron Man?" Because that's his original declaration in the first movie. And immediately they're like, "Dude, let's go out and film it." So that was actually a pickup.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, what a great behind the scenes story, huh?
Editors are so important in these movies. They're just as much a part of the creative process as our directors.
I think everybody,
Yeah.
everyone offers thoughts and opinions and
Yeah.
gives their take, and this stuff ends up in the movie and it makes it that much better.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't think of any other line that would have had the same impact as that one that Tony says right before he snaps.
And it's like it's like poetry. It's
It's like poetry. It rhymes.
It rhymes. Everything rhymes. They've bookended this entire journey with Tony Stark being true to who he is and not hiding the fact that he is a hero and that he's trying to be a hero, and he finally does it. At the beginning, he was kind of this brash, like uncertain but cocky hero, and at the end he was resolved and ready to give his life for his friends and his family and the world, and he's still just as confident in who he is. I am Iron Man. Oh, so good.
Yeah.
So I guess we're at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Should we? I mean, do you want to talk about the end after all of that?
Yeah, we can talk about the Tony Stark funeral.
Yeah.
How did they get all those actors in one place?
I know.
My question is, okay, was it CGI'd or did they have that planned ahead of time? I know there was one photo that they took of all of the cast members who have ever been in Marvel movies. They all stood there. It was like for the 10-year anniversary of Marvel Studios. And you had Robert Downey Jr. all the way to Michael Douglas. I think they were all in this picture, this group photo together. I'm wondering if that was the day that they shot this scene because they were all in the same place. They were at the studio. That's the only other thing I could think of. Otherwise, were they CGI'd in? Like it looks like they were all standing there.
Yeah. I want to believe they were all there. That looks like such a great photo or like video moment. But and for those of you who are wondering who that tall blonde kid is at the end, that's Harley Keener from Iron Man 3. The kid that Tony hung out with in Iron Man 3. For those of you who are wondering who that is.
It's crazy how far they went back to bring these obscure characters into this one scene. Yeah. And I think seeing the scene, the way it pans through and we see all the faces of these people who have been in this universe, it reminds me of these panels in the comics, whenever there's the death of a major superhero like Superman, whatever. You see all the heroes like join together in honoring the memory of the person who passed away, and I think this is that moment translated into a movie. But you have all these A-list superstars, A-list actors in one scene, and it definitely has that same impact.
And then, of course, there are other pass-offs, but I think let's jump to the last part where Captain Steve Rogers hands off the shield.
He hands off the shield to his friend Falcon.
You sound so excited about it.
It's a cool moment, but he's not a super soldier. He doesn't have super strength. What is he going to do? Like, how's he going to fight, super villains? I don't understand.
None of us do.
Hopefully they take some of Bucky's blood and inject them into...
He looks kind of buff, though.
He's buff. He's a buff guy, but he's not...
Dude.
He can't even, run as fast as Captain America.
On your left. Maybe he became a super soldier in all those years. Yeah, I thought, it's a symbolic thing, but if anything, Bucky probably deserves that mantle more. We
I think
care
Bucky's
more
messed
about-
up in the head, though.
He is messed up. He has killed a lot of people. So I guess, why did they have to make him old? This is the one thing that I feel they truly broke their rules in time travel. Doesn't make sense that Steve Rogers was old there. If he stayed behind in the other realities, how did he end up back in this one? I guess we'll never know.
Well, when you return all the Soul Stones, all the Infinity Stones, all the other branching timelines close, and it's back to one timeline, right?
Yeah, but he stayed. Yeah, that's
So
true.
he stayed in 1970s, and he lived his life. I think
So that means he got old. He got old in. He merged into this new timeline.
And I read an article about the question of Captain America's fate.
Yeah.
And they said that
There
they
were two of
acknowledged
them.
that there were two Steve Rogers in this timeline
Yeah.
at one point.
But does that mean there's another old Steve Rogers somewhere in the
That
current
one they could have
timeline?
just left in the ice still.
I know, but like, how do you?
Yeah, who knows? I mean, that's another loose end that I think you could kind of nitpick and criticize on. I thought it was a nice way to send off Captain America.
Yeah.
Primarily because the final shot of the movie is him in the home with Peggy giving, they get their dance. It was very touching.
Yeah.
And then they kiss, and that's the end of the film.
Yeah. And again, it's like, what matters at this point? The like various
Exactly.
nitpicky details, or the send off of one of our iconic heroes in this whole saga. I think they did just fine. Yeah, we can nitpick the time travel stuff, but at this point, I think knowing that Steve was able to be reunited with his love in the end was beautiful, I think. Cool. So any last thoughts before we close up?
Yeah, if you have listened to this point, thank you so much
Yes.
for joining us and for listening over an hour of us talking about this movie. But it's one of my favorite superhero movies of all time. I think I loved the Dark Knight trilogy. Yeah, I'm just so grateful for the Marvel Cinematic Universe and all these movies that it's given us. As a little kid, I played a lot with Marvel trading cards, action figures. I watched the cartoons. These heroes have been with me, since then, and it's given us so many great moments where they kind of brought our fantasies, our childhood dreams to life, and I think pulled off something that was like impossible. Bringing all these individual movies together and tying them into these event films where they team up. There's nothing like it. I don't know if it'll ever happen like this ever again. And I don't think there will ever be a movie like Endgame to wrap everything up, to bring back all these actors that we've been with for all this time in one final film. And to have a send-off in this way. I'm so glad that we witnessed that together. I'm glad that I'm excited to eventually, tell my son. I don't know if I'm gonna have I have a boy right now. I don't know if we're gonna have another boy or a girl, but I can't wait to tell my kids and show my kids these movies and to tell them about the time that we watched it together and just how the electricity in the air that night.
Yeah. Well, I can't close it up any better than that, but I will say I'm a newer Marvel fan. I kind of started caring when these movies came out, and I'm happy to say I've gone on this journey since I basically turned into an adult at age 18 and all the way through. And yeah, this is history in movies in Hollywood. We've never seen anything like it. We will never see anything like it again. So thank you to Marvel for doing this, and and thank you all for following along with us on this 2-hour odyssey of unpacking our thoughts. If you chose to listen to this instead of watching the movie, we're thankful. You would have gotten through about 2/3 of the movie with us at this point. But yeah, we're thankful for this. So should I close here?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for listening. This has been the Weak and Foolish Movie Podcast. We hope that this discussion was neither weak nor foolish, but it was actually helpful and processing, because Lord knows we needed some time to process after seeing it for the first time. So thank you for choosing us if this was what you decided to do after seeing it. Next episode is coming up, who knows when. So stay tuned until then. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.